What's going on, guys? It's Zach here. Bring you guys another fantasy football video. So we'll be going over every single matchup in Week 10 and sort of going over which players, position by position, should and shouldn't be in your fantasy football lineups. I'll sort of go over what the game environment's supposed to look like, what we can expect from each player, and sort of just the general feeling I have towards whether or not they should be started. As always, if you guys have any specific start-sit questions, I love helping you guys get those answered and getting your lineup set. So just feel free to drop a comment here below the video. I'll be happy to get back to you. I believe I've responded to every single comment anyone's made all season, so I'll continue doing that. I'll be able to do my best and help get you guys all set. Sunday morning as well, 1 hour before the early morning games kick off, I'll be going live. I'll go over any of the last minute injury updates, help answer questions on air in terms of who your start sit questions end up being. So if you want to make sure you can tune into that, just be subscribed to the channel. That you'll get a notification when I go live. You can hop in, but normally it goes live at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. So feel free to tune in. Love to have as many of you guys there as possible. So yeah, with that, I think it should be a fun Week 10. We've got a lot of matchups here, a lot of really good teams on bye as well. We got the Chiefs, Dolphins, Eagles, and the Rams on bye. So a lot of fantasy relevant players are on bye. There's going to be a lot of start-sit questions surrounding that. We've obviously got a lot of injuries as always. So I'll be here to help you guys navigate through it all and help figure out who should be in your lineups this week. So yeah, with that, let's just get into the first game here. So starting things off, we've got the Colts at the Patriots. I do want to mention to everybody this game is going to be played in Germany. That means that we're going to have another early morning kickoff. That'll be at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. So make sure that either you've got your lineup set Saturday night or you're going to wake up before this game kicks off. I don't want any situation where any of you guys are caught off guard by a player being on your bench that you meant to start, or maybe a player gets hurt and you're not ready for that. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're all set for those early morning games. I know it's really early for those of us on the West Coast like myself, but should be a fun game here. It's not quite as exciting on paper as the Chiefs Dolphins was going to be last week, but the Colts and Patriots should still be a relatively high scoring game. Neither defense has been all that great so far this season, so there should be a lot of points scored actually. Jonathan Taylor finally got that workhorse role last week. He had 74% of the snaps. Looked good, caught like 5 passes. Just honestly, I think the breakout for him's coming. He's been good so far since returning from injury, but or not injury from that holdout. But we're gonna see him put up some monster numbers here sooner or later, and that could happen this week. So I'd definitely be starting Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman, he's a rock solid starter as a wide receiver too. I'd definitely play him as well. But I'd probably bench every other Colt. Zach Moss wasn't involved last week enough for me to trust him. Josh Downs, he's listed as questionable to play this on Sunday, but he didn't practice all week. He aggravated a knee injury on Sunday last week, and even if he plays, I doubt he'll be 100%, so I wouldn't be playing him. That means I'm not going to play Minshew or anything like that either. For the Patriots, I think Ramondre Stevenson, he's a low-end running back one play. He's been super involved as a pass catcher, always a threat to score, and the Colts really aren't that great against the run at all. It's certainly the easiest area for the teams to beat up on them, and you could certainly see this be a big game for both running backs in New England. That's why I think Zeke is actually not the worst flex play as well. I wouldn't be shocked if both those guys find the end zone. Demario Douglas, you can use him in the flex. He's currently listed as questionable with an injury, but it does sound like he's going to suit up. That being said, I don't want to be playing him, but it's a decent matchup against the Colts, and he is really their only healthy pass catcher with now Devontae Parker out, Kendrick Bourne's out. He should see targets if active. Same reasons there. Hunter Henry, he can be used as a streaming option. Again, he'll be necessary to the offense, but I personally would look elsewhere at the tight end position, and I would sit everyone else in this offense for sure. Next up, we got the Browns at the Ravens. Should be a really fun game, a classic AFC South matchup, or AFC North matchup. But we're going to see a game between two really just good NFL defenses, and that makes me not really excited about many of the fantasy relevant options here for the Browns. I think I'd want to be benching every single player but Amari Cooper. Even Amari Cooper, he'd be a low end wide receiver 3 for me. And you can play Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt, but you're going to need them to score for them to pay off. And like I said earlier, it's going to be a really defensive game. I don't see there being a lot of points scored, and that doesn't make me super excited about any of the sort of ancillary pieces here. David Njoku, same reason there. I don't want to be playing him just because you probably need a touchdown for him to pay off, and I don't think we'll see that happen that's not going to be very likely for him this week. For the Ravens, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, even a tough matchup, you're going to be playing them. I know it's been really hit or miss so far for Lamar, but you've got to start him every week. He's obviously got that extremely high ceiling, and it's just you don't want to have Lamar on your bench when he blows up. So I'd be starting Lamar for sure. Gus Edwards, Zay Flowers, all the other options. I think I'd be benching them though. Gus Edwards, he's not going to be fantasy relevant unless he falls in the end zone, and for the same reasons I've said earlier, I don't think this is going to be a super high scoring game. I think we could see a situation where this ends up being like a 19-16 kind of score. We'll see what happens, but I don't want to be playing really into these ancillary pieces. Zay Flowers has been mediocre lately. Only had one catch last week, and in a really tough matchup here, I wouldn't be starting Zay Flowers. Keaton Mitchell, I know he looked really great last week, but he's banged up a little bit. He's probably going to play this week and should see a few more touches than he has in the past, but too tough of a matchup. I want to wait and see it happen before I trust him in my lineup as well. So I think it's Lamar, Andrews, and Cooper, and that's probably it for me in this entire game. Next, we got the Packers at the Steelers. For the Packers, I think Aaron Jones is a solid running back too. He's looked good since returning from injury. He's finally getting that like true Aaron Jones work role or workhorse role. Not really a workhorse role, but he's being given that role that he's normally had in this offense. Obviously, AJ Dillon is still involved, but Aaron Jones is obviously super efficient when given the touches that he's given. I think you can play Aaron Jones as a solid running back too. Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson, they're both low end flex options for me. I hope you can do better. I just don't really trust his passing game at all in Green Bay. Romeo Dobbs keeps scoring touchdowns and really not doing anything other than that. Christian Watson, he runs a lot of routes, gets targeted down the field, and Jordan Love just can't connect with him. So obviously there's a ceiling for both these guys, but I think I'd prefer to bench them both if I can. AJ Dillon, Jordan Love, and Luke Musgrave, they'd be on my bench as well. Just no real faith in any of those options for Green Bay. For the Steelers, Najee and Jalen Warren, they're both low-end running back twos. I think I prefer Najee to Warren this week. You can beat the Packers on the ground. I think the Steelers probably win this game, and I think Najee probably finds the end zone as well. We're sort of seeing him actually look at a little bit better as lately as well. Sort of similar to what happened last season. We saw the Steelers and Najee Harris in particular play a lot better over the second half of the season. I think we could see that happen again this year. So Najee's a guy that I think is going to find the end zone this week, so I'd probably be playing Najee, and then Warren's just a solid low-end running back two/flex option, especially in PPR. Deontay, he's an auto start. He's very clearly the wide receiver one in Pittsburgh. You've got to play him every single week at this point. And then George Pickens, he's a low end wide receiver three for me. You're hoping for a big play or a touchdown, and he obviously can give that to you, but the volume's just not there for him. I think the Steelers will be able to run the ball and win this game pretty easily. I just don't see the Packers putting up a lot of points. So I don't love the thought of playing George Pickens, but I get it if you need to. Next, we got the 49ers at the Jaguars. I've got to believe that the 49ers bounce back this week. They'll probably end up winning this game. I just don't really see a world where they drop four straight, especially coming out of a bye. I'd be starting CMC, Debo, Ayuk, and George Kittle. That big four, you should probably have to start all of them. I know it's tough for all four of those guys to eat on any given week, but it's just tough to sit any of them either. So you're probably playing all four of those guys. That makes Brock Purdy a decent streaming option. You can throw on the Jaguars. You just can't really run on them very well. So I think this ends up being a relatively high-scoring game. I'd probably be looking to play Brock Purdy as a solid streaming option if you needed him. For the Jaguars, Travis Etienne, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, they're all pretty much locks in your lineup. I can't imagine benching any of those four guys. Makes Trevor Lawrence a decent streaming option as well. I think we could see, like I said earlier, a pretty high scoring game. That makes Trevor Lawrence a decent streaming option, but he really has underwhelmed so far this season. So if you want to look elsewhere, I do think I prefer Purdy to Trevor Lawrence in this matchup. But I get it if you want to play Trevor Lawrence as well. And then last thing I'll say here, not going to play him obviously if active. Zay Jones listed as questionable, but if he does end up playing this week, he's someone that I do want to have on my roster, just as a guy that I do think has a chance to end up being fantasy relevant down the stretch. So I don't really think he should be just sitting on waivers right now. He's available in a lot of leagues, and I don't think that's necessarily right. Next, we got the Saints at the Vikings. For the Saints, Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara, they're both going to be must starts. We finally saw Olave find the end zone last week, put up one of his better performances from a fantasy perspective last week. I think we're going to see him and Derek Carr really start getting rolling here. So I think we'll be good to go with Olave and obviously Kamara. Even in a bit of a down week last week, you're going to be playing him. Rashid Shaheed and Michael Thomas, they're both low-end flex options. We have that ceiling with Shaheed any single week. He could obviously hit on a 50 or 60-yard touchdown on almost any given drive. So you can play Shaheed if you need upside, if you're like a high under or a pretty significant underdog in your matchup. I get playing Shaheed, but generally he's just a little bit too risky for me. Michael Thomas, we thought he was a super safe floor play as well, but then ended up with one target last week. I think I'd prefer to bench both these guys, but they're decent streaming options as like flex players if you need them. Taysom Hill, honestly, he needs to be in your lineup as a tight end. I don't like it. I don't really like that he's tight end eligible because he doesn't really play tight end as long as Juwan Johnson is active. But as long as that's going to continue being the thing, I think you can play Taysom Hill. Derek Carr, he's a low-tier streaming option. I do think there are better options out there, so I wouldn't be looking at him, but he's certainly someone you could play if you need to. For the Vikings, Alexander Mattison, TJ Hawkinson, they're both going to be in your lineups. Madison's just going to get a ton of work. I can't really see him putting up a high-end performance in a tough matchup against the Saints, but he'll volume his way to being a running back too. And then TJ Hawkinson, he's a good tight end. You have to play those for sure. Jordan Addison, he's a low-end wide receiver 3. The Saints are a tough matchup again. I think this is going to be a pretty low-scoring game in general. It could go either way. We'll see what happens, but I don't really see there being a ton of volume for Jordan Addison, so I don't really want to be playing him. But I totally get it if you need to. He's definitely usable. He's not someone I'm excited about. And then Josh Dobbs is actually a decent streaming option as well. I would prefer him to Derek Carr, for example. I am currently playing him in one of my 7 leagues, so he's someone that I can see you guys looking at, but I don't expect a huge performance out of him for sure. Next up, we got the Texans at the Bengals. I think for the Texans that Stroud, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz are going to be in your lineups for sure. Nico Collins is just listed as out or declared out just a little bit before recording this, so it's going to be a really nice concentration of targets in this offense. It's going to go to Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz, and we'll see some work getting thrown to Noah Brown as well. That makes Noah Brown an interesting flex play if you want to look there. Damian Pierce was declared out as well. I don't want to go back in the fire with Devin Singletary. He was really bad last week despite being given that workhorse role. And this is just a Texans team that can't run the ball right now, so I wouldn't play Singletary. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, they're all going to be auto starts for me every single week. I like Boyd as a flex play because T. Higgins is inactive. That makes Tyler Boyd effectively their really solid wide receiver too. You can play him for sure. And you could get cute and play Irv Smith if you want to. He did score a touchdown last week. He's pretty clearly the tight end one in Cincinnati, and with no Higgins and a potentially limited Chase with that back injury, you could see more targets funneled to that tight end position. So if you want to try and get cute and stream Irv Smith, you could do it, but I don't necessarily love it. I'm just putting it out there as an option. Next, we got the Titans at the Buccaneers, and what I think could be another really high-scoring game. The Buccaneers' pass defense has just been really bad lately, and it allows for there to be a lot of sort of higher-scoring games. For the Titans, I think Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins, they've got to be in your lineups. Hopkins is a guy that I think he's going to be high in wide receiver two this week, probably due for a big game. Like I said, the Buccaneers' pass defense is just really not good. Tajay Spears is a desperation play at the running back position for the Titans. You can use him. You're hoping for this to be a high-scoring game, hoping he catches some passes, and in PPR, you could do worse if you need to. Kyle Phillips is a desperation streaming option as a flex play. Again, PPR only pretty much for him, but he is more involved in the offense. Treylon Burks isn't going to play this week, so you could play Kyle Phillips if you need to. I think you could stream Chig Okonkwo and Will Levis as well, but I hope you have better options. I don't love either one here, but I think there is a pathway for both of them to have a decent game. Baker Mayfield, he's a solid streaming option. I'm actually playing him in one of my 7 leagues, so I get it if you want to play him, but I don't think he's in line for a huge game, but certainly decent if you need to. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rashad White, they're all going to be in my starting lineup for sure. Rashad White's been super involved, even in a tough matchup against a good run defense. He'll probably just PPR his way to being relevant, so I'm playing him. And then Cade Otton, a decent streaming option. He did score last week, but I don't really love it. I prefer to look elsewhere if I can. Next, we've got the Lions at the Chargers. Fortunately, we get David Montgomery back this week, and he should be right back in your lineups. We probably see a slight decrease in his role from the weeks previously. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs showed that he can handle a big workload, and he's obviously an elite player. So I think we end up seeing 15 to 20 touches for Montgomery, probably in that like 12 to 15 range for Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe more if the game goes the Lions' way. But obviously, Montgomery is going to get the goal line work. Jahmyr Gibbs will probably be the guy that they use on like obvious passing downs, and I think they could just both be in your lineups. Montgomery's like a low end running back 1 for me. Gibbs would be like a fringe top 15 guy for me going forward. That being said, Gibbs, Amon-Ra, and Sam Laporta need to be in your lineups as well. I like Goff as a streaming option this week. I'd be playing him, but I'd probably be benching Josh Reynolds and Jameson Williams, along with Donovan Peoples-Jones, if anyone's even considering that. Don't want to play any of those guys until I sort of see how that shakes out. For the Chargers, Herbert, Eckler, and Keenan, they're all going to be in your lineups for sure, and I probably just wouldn't play anyone else. Gerald Everett's a decent streaming option always if you need to, but the Lions aren't bad against the tight end position. I just don't think he's in line for a very big week if he doesn't score. And then Quentin Johnson, I don't want to play yet. I just want to see him perform at a high level before I ever trust him, but I wouldn't drop him either. He's got 3 more weeks of Joshua Palmer being on IR. He's got a good shot, at least have that role in the offense, and if he actually ends up being good at all, he'll definitely be in that role. So Quentin Johnson should be on rosters, just not in starting lineups right now. Next up, we have the Falcons at the Cardinals. For the Falcons, as bad as the usage has been for Bijan, I know he's only got that 1 carry inside the 5-yard line so far all season. Obviously, he's sort of being underutilized in general, being carried by Algier in terms of total carries in the season. I think this is a must-start week for Bijan. We could see him get more involved in the game plan. He's definitely a guy that they need to get more involved if they want to make a push for the playoffs. And I think this is their best chance to do it. Obviously, it's a really plus matchup against the Cardinals. I'm playing Bijan everywhere I'd have him. And then Algier, I think he's a solid play as well. We know he's probably going to get the goal line work, which is unfortunate, but I bet Algier scores this week. He's someone that I'd definitely be getting into my lineups. Drake London, he's a wide receiver 3 this week. Should be back from injury. You can play him, but I don't think the Falcons will really need him. Probably win the game pretty easily. I mean, Kyler could come in his first game back and perform at a high level, but I would bet on him being a little bit rusty. Probably a pretty easy win for the Falcons, but we'll see what happens there. And then that makes Jonnu and Kyle Pitts both like low-end tight end 1, sort of like they've been every single week so far this season. For the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, he's a risky streaming option. Obviously, of a lot of the streaming options I've mentioned so far, we know he's got the highest ceiling. If you're a significant underdog and you want to just slot him in there and hope for that pop-off game in his first week back, I get it, but I would expect him to be pretty rusty. Probably won't run quite as much as he was pre-ACL either. And the weapons aren't fantastic. The Falcons' defense isn't bad, so I don't think I'd love playing Kyler Murray, but if you have him, I get it if you want to go that way. I would be starting James Conner and Marquise Brown this week. Both are really integral to this offense. They're going to be the focal points for them, and I think that James Conner should just get a full workload along with Marquise Brown this week. So I'd probably play both of them. And then Trey McBride, he's a solid streaming option. I'd probably be playing him if I have him, unless I've got a really good option. I just picked him up for depth, and I think he does need to be rostered in every league. He's shown that he can be a really useful fantasy player. And with Kyler Murray back, he could easily emerge as the number 2 option in this offense. And one other player not listed here that I will mention, Michael Wilson, should be rostered, I think, in more leagues. There is a chance here that Kyler Murray comes out and just elevates this entire Cardinals offense and makes them like a good offense the rest of the season. And if that's the case, you'd want Michael Wilson on your roster. So if he's on waivers, he should be rostered right now. And if you have that extra roster spot, I think he's a guy that you could go add. Next, we got the Giants hit the Cowboys. The Giants are going to get killed in this one. Vegas has the line at -17 for the Cowboys, so I honestly don't know if that's going to be enough. The Giants have an implied point total of like 10.5 points. I don't know if they get that far either. They haven't scored more than 10 points in like a month, so we'll see what happens there. I don't expect anybody on this Giants team to put up a high-end fantasy performance. Saquon is obviously going to see 25 to 30 touches if they can get him that much work. He needs to be in lineups, but you're probably just hoping that he scores, and he's probably not going to, so he'll probably just get 25, 30 touches for 80 to 90 yards, catch 5 passes hopefully, and that's how he ends up being good. But I don't think a real ceiling game is there for Saquon this week. Tony Pollard, however, I think that ceiling game is there for him. This is going to be the week for him. I truly believe he finds the end zone maybe one and maybe not once, maybe twice this week. The Giants are going to get killed. Like I said, the Cowboys will be up a ton. They could probably lean on that run game, and Pollard should finally have a breakout game this week. CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, I think they should be in lineups. Obviously, CeeDee's just been elite lately. You're obviously playing him. And then Jake Ferguson's pretty much emerged as the number 2 pass catching option in the offense. I'd be playing him. And I think you can stream Dak, but my concern would be that the Cowboys just get up 21 points in the first quarter, and then you don't even need to throw the ball the entire rest of the game. And if that's the case, Dak could have a bad game if they have a defensive score or something like that. So there is risk here, but obviously those first 21 points that they scored, they need to score them somehow. And if Dak gets 2 or 3 touchdowns early, he'll be totally fine. So you can play him if you want to. Next, we got the Commanders at the Seahawks. I think Sam Howell and Logan Thomas are going to be solid streaming options for the Commanders. The Seahawks are always really bad at defending the tight end. They always obviously give it up in terms of passing yardage as well to quarterbacks. So I think Sam Howell's in line for a pretty big performance here. Brian Robinson and Terry McLaurin should probably be in lineups as well. We saw the Seahawks get absolutely gashed by the rushing game of the Baltimore Ravens last week. Obviously, that's the Ravens. The Commanders aren't quite the same rushing attack, but the Seahawks are vulnerable on the ground, and Brian Robinson's been scoring enough that you can play him for sure. And then McLaurin, the Seahawks haven't been great against opposing pass offenses. I think McLaurin just got to be in lineups. Jahan Dotson, he's a solid flex play. I think this could end up being a sneaky high-scoring game, and Dotson's got a good shot of scoring in a given week. And I actually feel like Antonio Gibson is a sneaky okay play at the running back position in PPR formats only. Been more involved lately, had 5 targets each of the last 2 weeks. He's actually looked good. Obviously, he's always been a good player. For whatever reason, he just doesn't get the volume that he probably deserves in this offense. But Gibson's a good player. He should be involved enough. This should be a high enough scoring game that if you want to play him as a desperation running back option, I think you can do that. For the Seahawks, I'd start DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Kenneth Walker. I don't really love any of them. Obviously, Kenneth Walker hasn't been great for the better part of a month now. Lockett's been the only somewhat reliable Seahawk receiver to this point, and then DK, he hasn't finished any single week inside the top 20 at the position so far this season, so it's been really rough for DK, but I think, like I said earlier, this could end up being a high-scoring game. There should be a lot of points available, and I think I'm probably just playing all 3 of them and hoping it works out. And then Geno Smith, I think you can stream him. Obviously, he's been really bad so far this whole season, so I don't know if I personally have the stones to play him. But, I mean, the Commanders' defense is really bad. They gave it up to opposing quarterbacks, and if there was ever going to be a week for Geno Smith to break out, it would be this week. I didn't list him here either, but JSN obviously had a decent week last week, caught 6 passes for 66 yards. He's a player that you can stream as like a low-end flex option if you really need to, but I'd certainly prefer to bench him if I can. I'd obviously prefer Dotson to him. Plenty of options available that I'd probably just be looking to bench JSN, but if you want to play him, I could see him potentially having a sneaky good game. Next, we got the Jets at the Raiders. The NFL just continues to give us some pretty crappy primetime games. This will be the Sunday night matchup, and I get it. We were supposed to get Aaron Rodgers versus Jimmy Garoppolo here. It didn't quite materialize that way, but regardless, this could still be a relatively fun game. Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, they're the only Jets that I consider starting. Garrett Wilson's just been a target hog lately, even though they're not great targets. He's been involved enough that you're definitely playing Garrett Wilson, and then Breece Hall is getting 20-plus touches every week. He's a threat to take any play to the house at any given moment, so you're playing Breece Hall. I think he could potentially have a really big game here. For the Raiders, I would start Josh Jacobs. He's been a lot better of late. He got 20-plus touches last week, scored a touchdown, looked good. I'm playing Josh Jacobs next week if I can. Devontae Adams, he's probably going to be in your lineups, but if you have better options and are bold enough to do it, I would understand benching him. The Jets are just really good at defending the keeping opposing wide receivers from scoring fantasy points. They are the worst matchup in the NFL for fantasy wide receivers. Then on top of that, Adams hasn't really been good for the better part of a month. I could totally see Devontae Adams just having another really bad game here. So honestly, I'd recommend potentially trading Devontae Adams if you can. He's a guy that's obviously not set up for success over the next month, and if you are in a situation where you need to win now, I don't think Adams is going to be a guy that can help you do that until the fantasy playoffs. So Probably it probably ends up being started by most people. He's probably just going to be like a wide receiver 2 this week, but there's obviously a path for him just to be a really bad fantasy asset again this week, so I'd be a little bit worried. And then Jacoby Myers, same reasons as above. I don't think O'Connell can support 2 wide receivers. This Jets defense is really good at defending the pass, and I don't think Myers is going to be able to perform at a high level here, so I'd prefer to sit Jacoby Myers if I can this week. And lastly, we've got the Denver Broncos at the Buffalo Bills. I might be crazy, but mark my words, I do think the Broncos are going to end up winning this game. The Bills have just not been great of late. The Broncos are coming off of a bye. They've won 2 straight. They look better lately, and this defense is playing better. And on top of that, they've been able to run the ball relatively well. That means Javonte Williams does absolutely need to be in your lineups. He had 30 touches before the bye, and the Bills really can't stop the run. That's where they've been beat so far this season, and that's exactly what Denver's going to want to do. They're going to go in here. They're going to try and play defense, run the ball 30, 40 times, and just play keep away and let Josh Allen make 1 or 2 mistakes over the course of the game that lose it for them. So I do think we could see a pretty sort of grinded out game by the Broncos here that results in them winning. Sutton, he's probably a wide receiver 3 for me. He just keeps scoring touchdowns. Obviously, he's not super involved between the 20s, but when they get towards the red zone, they want to throw the ball there, and Courtland Sutton's been really good at that. So I think Sutton's a guy that you can play, but you do need him to score. Russ, he's a play as a streaming option as well. The Bills' defense is just not what it was at the start of the season. They're super banged up. I think they can get beat, and Russ and this entire offense has looked better lately, and potentially they open things up. Maybe we see more Marvin Mims after the bye, and I think Russ is a guy that you can stream if you want to. Jerry Jeudy, he'd be a low-end flex play for me. I'd prefer to bench him if I can, but I get it if you need to play him. He's like sort of in that like JSN tier as a guy that like I'm not super excited about, but I could see a path to him having a good game. So you can play him. For the Bills, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and Dalton Kincaid, they're all going to be auto starts for me. Obviously, I know I said this could be a bit of a lower scoring game, but Josh Allen's too good. He's too important to that offense. Diggs is looking great. Note that he did pop up on the injury report today, so see what happens with that, but I'm not worried about him missing time until we see more reports out of that. So it sounds like I would still expect Stephon Diggs to be there, and then obviously Kincaid, which is super involved. You're playing him. And then Gabe Davis, he's Gabe Davis. He's going to be boom or bust. He'll get you anywhere between 0 and 25 fantasy points. I sort of feel like this could be a week where he has a big game because he's just generally oscillatory. He's been really good at home, really bad on the road. I think I'd be looking to play Gabe Davis this week, but I understand if you want to bench him for sure. And then James Cook, he's a low-end running back too. Not involved enough in the offense to be a must-start, but he's a guy that they can obviously throw the ball to. He's efficient when given touches, so you can play James Cook, but he's just not going to put up a very high-end performance unless he rips off a long one. So that'll do it for Week 10 start-sit video. I've gone through every single matchup here and sort of gone player by player and told you whether or not they should be in your fantasy football lineups. Up next, Sunday morning, I'll be doing a live stream where I'll go over any sort of last-minute injury updates, any sort of start-sit questions you guys will ask me on air. That'll kick off 1 hour before the morning games kick off, so 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. So swing by for that. I'd love to get you guys all set up for Week 10, hopefully get you guys some wins. We're coming down the stretch here. We've got this week and then just 4 more before the fantasy playoffs in most leagues, and we'll be hitting that home stretch and really trying to bring home some trophies this week. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch these videos. Hopefully you're finding them helpful. As always, if you guys have any specific questions or anything, just let me know in the comments. I love interacting with you guys there. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do take the time to do that. I know a lot of you guys watch these videos and haven't subscribed already. We're just over 930 subscribers right now, and I'd love to hit 1,000 by the end of the NFL season. Again, that's about 10 per week the rest of the way, and I really do think we can get there. So just help me out, subscribe to the channel. It'll help me help you out, so make sure you don't miss anything going forward. So really appreciate everything. It's been super cool to see the channel grow like that. Just having a lot of fun. So thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.